Welcome to A Slice with Dice, a podcast exploring the ideas, pressures, and possibilities shaping how we learn, lead, and grow. I'm Corey Alderdice. For over 20 years, my work has lived at the intersection of gifted education, leadership development, and school culture, supporting students as they find their strengths, educators as they stretch their thinking, and schools as they build pathways that expand opportunity. Ready to dive in? Here's this week's Slice. One of the trickiest parts of college admissions is that the advice can sound contradictory. On one hand, students are told to focus on fit. Find the place where you'll thrive. Look for the academic programs, campus culture, financial model, and student experience that makes sense for who you are and who you're becoming. And that's still the right starting point. Fit should be the center of the process. But as we talked about earlier this week, there's another part of the admissions equation that families sometimes overlook, misunderstand, or dismiss as a game. And that is demonstrated interest. So demonstrated interest is not the same thing as fit. Fit is about whether the college makes sense for the student. Demonstrated interest, on the other hand, is about whether the college has evidence that the student is seriously consider enrolling. And that distinction matters more than ever. So we're in an admissions environment where application numbers continue to rise. According to the Common App's 2024-2025 end-of-season report, nearly 1.5 million first-time applicants submitted more than 10 million applications, crossing that 10 million mark for the first time. The number of applicants grew, and students were also applying to slightly more colleges on average. That volume changes the admissions landscape. It means colleges are not just reviewing more students, they are trying to interpret more uncertainty. A student applies to 10, 12, 15, or even 20 schools, and some of those schools may be genuine first-choice options. Others may be strategic additions. Others may be aspirational reaches. Some may be financial backups. Others still may be schools that simply appeared on a list because they had no supplemental essay, no application fee, or a deadline that made it easy to click submit. Now, from the student side, that can feel reasonable. Families are trying to manage uncertainty in a competitive process. But for the college side, it creates a problem. Colleges are not simply asking, is this student qualified? They're also asking, if we admit this student, are they likely to come? That is the enrollment management question behind demonstrated interest. And this is where we need to be precise. Demonstrated interest does not matter everywhere. Some institutions are very clear that they do not use it. The University of Georgia, for example, who recently eliminated one of their supplemental essays, says directly that demonstrated or continued interest is not considered in the admissions review process, in part because not all students have equal access to campus visits, events, or other forms of engagement. Now, that is an important reminder. Families should not try to manufacture demonstrated interest at colleges that have already said they do not consider it. But other institutions are much more open about the role engagement plays. Tulane, as we discussed in the last episode, has long been one of the clearest examples. In a post from its admissions blog, Tulane explained that engagement helps the university predict enrollment more accurately because it can see who would seriously consider attending if admitted. Tulane also notes that it has far more qualified applicants than available space. Now, in another admissions blog post, Tulane described engagement as a kind of, quote, trail of breadcrumbs that helps admissions counselors advocate for a student. That phrase is useful because it captures what demonstrated interest is supposed to be. It's not one grand gesture, it's not pestering an admissions officer, it's not sending weekly emails or showing up with a gimmick. It's a pattern of reasonable, authentic engagement that helps a college understand that the student has done the work, understands the institution, and may actually enroll if admitted. This is especially relevant for a certain lane of selective college admissions. At the very top of the selectivity pyramid, the most famous institutions in the country do not need much reassurance that admitted students are interested. Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, MIT, Duke, and the rest of that Ivy and Ivy Plus world have enormous demand. Their issue is not usually whether students want them. Their issue is choosing among an overwhelming number of extraordinary applicants. But there is a broad and important layer of highly attractive colleges just outside that very top tier. These may be selective private universities, strong national universities, popular liberal arts colleges, or institutions with growing reputations and increasingly competitive applicant pools. So they are not fallback schools in any meaningful sense. They are very excellent institutions. But they are competing for students who are applying to the Ivies, the Ivy Plus schools, flagship honors college, merit scholarship programs, and other selective options. That is where yield becomes complicated, and that's where demonstrated interest can matter. Because when a college is choosing among students who are all academically strong, the question is not always which student has the slightly higher test score or which student has one more AP class. Sometimes the question is which of these students is both qualified and likely to become a part of our incoming class. And that can sound a little uncomfortable, especially if we want college admissions to feel like a pure meritocracy. But admissions has never purely been about rank ordering students from strongest to weakest on paper. Colleges are building a class, they are shaping academic programs, they are managing residence halls, they're balancing financial aid, they're watching net tuition revenue, they're thinking about geography, major distribution, campus life, retention, and institutional priorities. And yes, that's a lot, but they are also predicting yield. So here's the practical message for students and families. Fit comes first. Demonstrated interest comes second, because when the fit is real, students need to make that interest visible. So let's talk about what that looks like in practice. The first step is to know whether demonstrated interest matters at a particular college. Now, this shouldn't be guesswork. Students and families should look at the college's admissions website. Common data set when available, admissions blogs, counselor resources, and public statements. Some colleges will say they consider demonstrated interest. Some will say they do not. Some will be less direct, but will strongly encourage engagement, interviews, visits, or communication with admissions representatives. That research matters because it keeps families from wasting energy. If a college says demonstrated interest is not considered, do not try to force it into the process. Don't send extra emails. Don't assume a call or a campus tour will make the difference. Don't ask questions that are already answered online just to get your name in front of someone. At those schools, the best strategy is to submit the strongest application possible by the application deadline. But if a college does consider demonstrated interest or clearly values engagement, then students should approach it with the same intentionality they bring to essays, course selection, or test planning. The second step is to get in the college systems early and consistently. That means joining the mailing list, requesting information, creating a student profile if the college offers one, registering through official channels for events, and using the same email across all of those interactions. Now, that last point sounds small, but it matters. If a student uses one email address for the mailing list and another for event registration, another for the application, and another for the applicant portal, the engagement record can become scattered. Families do not need to obsess over the technical side of this, but they should be organized. Use one student email address for the admissions process, preferably outside of your school's email system. Check it regularly, keep it professional, and make sure it is the same email attached to the application. The third step is to attend at least one official admissions event for schools where demonstrated interest may matter. Now, that could be a campus tour, but it doesn't have to be. Not every family can afford to visit every campus. Colleges know this. That's one of the reasons some institutions are cautious about using demonstrated interest too heavily. But engagement can happen in many ways. A student can attend a virtual information session. They can join a webinar about a specific academic program. They can participate in a student panel. They can attend a regional admissions event. They can meet the admissions representative when that person visits their high school. They can attend a college fair and scan in at the table. The point is not to turn admissions into a scavenger hunt. The point is to leave a reasonable record that the student has made an effort to learn about the institution. The fourth step is to engage with substance, not volume. This is where students sometimes get bad advice. Demonstrated interest does not mean emailing the admissions office constantly. It does not mean writing to say, "You are my top choice," when that may or may not be true. It does not mean asking a question that can be answered in 12 seconds on the website. A good interaction has a real purpose. So, for example, a student might write to ask about the difference between two academic pathways. They might ask whether undergraduates can participate in a particular research opportunity. They might ask how a major connects with internships in a specific city. They might ask about portfolio expectations, honor college review, scholarship timelines, or study abroad options tied to their field. The best questions show that the student has already done some homework. And so a weak question says, "Can you tell me about your business program?" A stronger question says, "I noticed that students in the business school can pursue both analytics and entrepreneurial pathways. For a student interested in startup work and data-informed decision-making, is it common to combine coursework across those areas?" So the second question is not just a question, it signals curiosity, seriousness, and fit. The fifth step is to understand the role of application timing. Now, early decision is the clearest possible signal of interest because it is binding. If admitted, the student is expected to enroll, assuming the financial aid package is workable. Now, that can be powerful at institutions where yield matters, but it's also a serious commitment. Families should not use early decision casually. It should only be used when the college is genuinely the student's first choice and the family has a serious financial conversation. That means using the net price calculator, talking honestly about cost, understanding where merit aid is likely or not, and recognizing that early decision can limit the ability to compare offers. Now, early action is different. It's usually non-binding, so it does not send the same level of commitment, but it can still show organization, preparedness, and seriousness. At some colleges, applying early may also put the student in better positions for scholarship consideration or earlier review. In that case, regular decision is not wrong. Many students apply regular decision for very good reasons. But at colleges that care about engagement, a student applying regular decision should make sure their interest is visible, highly visible in other appropriate ways. The sixth step is to use optional opportunities wisely. Now, optional does not always mean irrelevant. If a college offers an optional essay, students should ask whether they have something meaningful to say. Not every optional essay needs to be completed, but if the student can add context, explain a serious academic interest, or show authentic connection to the institution, that space can still matter. If a college offers an optional resume, upload one only if it adds clarity. Do not use it to repeat the activities section in a longer format. Use it to organize meaningful commitments, leadership work, research, creative production, or service in a way that helps the reader understand the student better. The seventh step is to prepare for deferrals and waitlist before they happen. Now, this is one of the places where demonstrated interest can be especially important. If a student is deferred, the college is essentially saying, "We are not ready to admit you now, but we're not done considering you." Now, if a student is waitlisted, the college is saying, "You may be admissible, but we do not yet know whether we have room." And in both situations, colleges are paying attention to continued interest. A strong letter of continued interest should be concise, specific, and honest. It should confirm that the student remains interested. It should provide meaningful updates, new grades, awards, leadership roles, projects, employment, accomplishments, or personal developments. If the college is genuinely the student's first choice, this is the case where the student should say so plainly, because, again, honesty matters. Do not tell 5 colleges that they are all your first choice. Do not say you will enroll if admitted unless that is true. Do not send an emotional, long letter that adds no new information. The best continued interest letters are focused. They communicate maturity and seriousness. They help the college understand that an offer of admission would be taken seriously. The 8th step is for families to keep the student in the lead. Parents can and should support the process. They can help with travel logistics, finances, calendars, and perspective. They can encourage organization. They can talk through tough choices. But demonstrated interest should come from the student. Admissions offices are not trying to admit the parent. When parents take over communication, it can sometimes weaken rather than strengthen the student's case. Now, there are exceptions, of course. Parents may need to communicate about financial aid, accessibility needs, travel logistics, or unusual circumstances. But when it comes to academic interest, campus questions, interviews, and follow-up, the student should be the primary voice. That's part of the signal. A student who can ask thoughtful questions, manage deadlines, communicate professionally, and follow up appropriately is showing readiness for college. The 9th step is to avoid turning demonstrated interest into performance. Now, this is important. The goal is not to create admissions theater. Students do not need to comment on every social media post. They don't need to attend 7 webinars. They don't need to send thank you notes for automated emails. They don't need to treat every interaction like a secret test. That mindset creates stress and often leads to awkward behavior, to say the least. A better approach is this: be visible, be consistent, be authentic, and be proportional. If a college truly is one of the students' top choices, their actions should reflect that. They should know something about the school. They should have attended an event if possible. They should read the emails. They should understand the academic programs. They should be able to explain why they would enroll. That is enough. The 10th step is to keep a simple interest tracker. Now, this doesn't need to be complicated. A spreadsheet or notes document here is fine. For each college, students might track whether demonstrated interest is considered, whether they joined the email list, attended an event, visited, met a representative, whether an interview is available, what application round they plan to use, and what specific reasons make the school a serious fit. That helps students stay organized, but can also help them make better decisions. Because sometimes when students cannot fill in the why this school column, that ought to tell them something. Maybe the college is on the list for the wrong reason. Maybe it's there because of rankings, name recognition, pressure from friends, or the illusion that more applications always means better odds. A college list should not just be long. It's got to be thoughtful. And demonstrated interest, when used properly, can help students clarify that list. Because here's the larger point. Students should not be trying to convince every college that it's their top choice. They should be trying to identify the colleges where their interest is real and then make that interest visible. That's a much healthier approach. It puts fit first. It respects the student's time, it respects the college's process, and it avoids the trap of treating admissions like a game where the goal is to manipulate invisible systems. Now, still, families should not be naive. In a world of rising application volume, declining admissions rates, and more students applying to more schools, colleges are making decisions with incomplete information. They're not just evaluating qualifications, they are trying to predict behavior. They're asking who is ready, who fits, who adds something to the class, who can succeed here, and in some cases, who might actually show up. That last question is where demonstrated interest lives. For students, the answer is not to panic. It's to be intentional. Start with fit. Build a list that makes sense. Learn which colleges care about engagement. Show up through official channels, ask real questions, use early application plans carefully. Take optional opportunities seriously when they add value, follow up after deferral or waitlist with substance and honesty, and keep the student, not the parent, not the consultant, not the algorithm, at the center of the process. The best version of demonstrated interest is not a trick. It is a student saying through a pattern of reasonable actions, I've looked closely, I understand what this place offers, I can see myself contributing here, and if admitted, I would take that opportunity seriously. In this admissions environment, that may not guarantee anything, but for the right school at the right moment, it can help a qualified student become a more credible admit. And in selective admissions, credibility matters. Not just the credibility of the transcript, not just the credibility of the resume, but of the student's intention. Because colleges are not simply filling an admitted student list. They are building an entering class. And students who want to be a part of that class should never be afraid to make that clear. A Slice with Dice is a production of Aldercube. Thanks for making time to reflect with me. If you're finding value in these episodes, I hope you'll subscribe and help spread the word. Until next time, lead boldly, listen closely, and keep pushing forward. I'll see you then.